The evacuation of Kabul International Airport is ongoing, and so has the mayhem. This has forced the U.S. president to announce that it may want to extend the U.S. military presence at the airport until all who want to leave the country can actually depart successfully. Meanwhile, the Taliban has rejected that and has said that it will not form a government until all foreign and U.S. forces leave Afghanistan. Is the Taliban ready to form a government, and what will it do about the resistance stronghold of Panjshir? Just some of the questions we'll be asking in this edition of The Spotlight. But first, to get an update, Amin Alami is a correspondent joining us from Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. Lots to cover in a short period of time. Give us the latest that you can, Amin.
Well, Kaba, despite American sources here in Kabul say that the situation is under their control in Kabul International Airport, but Taliban authorities say that the American troops have failed to bring the situation under their control in order to prevent the ongoing chaos in the Kabul International Airport. For instance, we can say that at least 7 individuals, including an Afghan soldier, were killed as a result of chaos and gunfire inside the Kabul International Airport. In the meantime, there are hundreds of Taliban members who are guarding the entrance gates of Kabul International Airport, preventing the people from entering this area, as well as there are also thousands of foreign troops, mainly American forces, UK troops, French soldiers, and as well as other foreign national military forces who are working to evacuate their own nationals as well as Afghan nationals who have worked with them. In the meantime, the Taliban are also very busy, not only with the chaos in Kabul International Airport and the rest of issues here in the Afghan capital Kabul, mainly when it comes to governance issues, but they have currently surrounded Panjshir Valley or Panjshir province and northeast of Kabul. Ahmed Massoud, who is the son of the Afghan legendary commander Ahmed Shah Massoud, is there, and he says that I will resist against the Taliban if they refuse to accept the establishment of an inclusive government that must address the need of the people of Afghanistan and that must respect many other issues such as human rights and democratic values. In the meantime, political consultations and meetings are also underway here in the Afghan capital Kabul between Taliban leadership and some prominent political leaders, including some former Afghan government officials. For instance, Abdullah, who was the head of Afghan Reconciliation Council, recently met with a high number of Taliban leaders. Hamid Karzai is another key figure who was the former Afghan president. He has also met with top political leaders as well as Hikmatyar has done so. These moves show that the Taliban are strongly after gaining control, politically gaining control over Afghanistan via gaining legitimacy. First, inside Afghanistan, and second, they are after gaining regional and international legitimacy. That is why we see that there are some reactions by regional powers and international countries, for instance, Iran, Russia, France, and UK. All of them has had their own viewpoint or stance regarding to the ongoing situation in Afghanistan. For instance, Russia says that Moscow is not concerned or worried about the ongoing situation in Afghanistan, particularly the rule of Taliban over Kabul, because as the Russian Foreign Minister recently said, the Taliban has proved to be committed to most of their commitments. So this shows that the situation is going to be more complex in Afghanistan. That is why top politicians inside Afghanistan are also calling on the Taliban and the rest of players inside this country to urgently find a solution to put an end to the ongoing situation and and a situation that is called the vacuum of power in Afghanistan.
Indeed.
In order to see a stable Afghanistan. But in the meantime, people are worried, not only here in Kabul, but across Afghanistan. Millions of people have so far been displaced, and hundreds of thousands of them have so far been left the country. The leaving of Afghanistan by its residents are continuing. That is why the Taliban are also trying to prevent the people from leaving Afghanistan behind, because they say that we are here to bring peace, security, and create jobs for Afghans. But as you see and as we saw on the streets of Kabul, here there are less presence of women here, and it proves that the Taliban needs to work further to prove that they are committed, especially when it comes to their promises.
Thank you very much for that. Amin Alami, we do appreciate it. Let me introduce our guest for this edition of the Spotlight, Professor of History at James Madison University, Shah Mahmood Hanifi, who joins us from Washington, D.C. An author and academic and an expert on Afghanistan, Muhammad Dawood Meraki, who joins us from Chicago. Okay, I'd like to welcome you both. And let me start with you, Shah Mahmood Hanifi, if I may, from Washington, D.C. I don't want to reiterate or repeat something that's been going on in the past days, and that is this messy evacuation that's taking place at Kabul International Airport. When you take a look at what's really going down here, when the U.S. has to have the Pentagon come out and brief reporters and the world daily, every day, as to what's going on there, tell us what that really reflects and what that really shows. Because some are saying that shows how unorganized Afghanistan was in terms of the way that it was executed based on the occupation that took place. And others are saying that this is a negative reflection on America's waning power. How do you see it?
Well, I think both of those viewpoints carry some legitimacy. The president's need to speak to the American public reflects, I think, a number of interest groups in the American political space, particularly veterans who are quite prominent and animated about maintaining, I guess, some ethics of comradeship in war, or something that necessitates ultimately or justifies the situation in Kabul at the airport. And that situation, to me, is the result of something that must have had some management to it. And I'm not sure about the particular players, but Zalmay Khalilzad would seem to have a role in the bloodless, really very few shots fired in Kabul or elsewhere when the Taliban gained control of these capitals. It's quite how that happened is, I think, not accidental, but that the result of the Taliban and Ghani's flight result in this situation at the airport that I think involved both very public American statements by the president and very clear, visible actions at the airport. But the American empire has been working at a public level, such as we just addressed, while at the same time working at a covert level that we just do not know precisely what communications with the Taliban and other actors, what extractive techniques by helicopter from the Baron Hotel, for example, recently, is going on. So I think, as always, with the American political arena, there is so much that the American public is not aware of and that the government will speak to because of securitization and sequestration of information.
Sure. Well, when you want to take a look at the response over here, Muhammad Dawood Meraki, the Taliban has said that they're not going to abide or listen to the Americans to have an extension beyond that August 31st deadline, in which the U.S. president at this point is contemplating it. Do you think that the Taliban, and they've actually warned the U.S. on this. Do you think the Taliban is going to follow up on the threats of the U.S. delayed departure, if you want to call it, from the country?
It's a complicated situation that we have at hand here. You see, we need to look back at what the United States had done post the Doha Agreement, and they had agreement that they will not violate such and such and such, whatever they agreed upon. But toward the end, before the victory in Kabul, the United States military has violated that agreement more than 800 times. And Taliban a few times, and it's been observed by others as well. Taliban, trying to use, rational thinking for the most part here. They realize that Americans have departed and they have no way of remaining in the country, and they got defeated, whether somebody accepted or not. But they don't want to complicate the situation. They don't want to exacerbate the already complicated situation and add to the animosity and to the onset of conflict. Their aim is political. Their aim is trying to form a government and get a recognition and have services to the people, to the population, and put an end to this disorder that's been going on in the airport. We must also add that this order was created by the United States government as a way, also as a brain drain, if you like. There's been a lot of technical people that've been moving out from here, and they have not been they were been reluctant actually to prevent people from entering the airport. They simply mentioned that everybody is welcome as long as they're able to come, and so now people are concerned about leaving the country. Remember, there was barely any option for them to leave the country. Now they have a free ticket, so to speak, and a lot of technical people are moving and they're leaving the country. So they created this mess, and Taliban are waiting, hoping they will, put an end to it, and that they will fulfill their obligation and leave the country by the 31st of August. Okay. But whether the Taliban will react, it's more a political issue at this point than a military one.
Well, when you take a look at the statements coming from the Taliban, as you said, it sounds like they're coherent, organized. Their approach is such that violence has decreased, but at the same time, there are question marks about whether they're actually going to be able to form a government. You have, on the one hand, if you want to call it a new administration called the Taliban, that has to run the economy, but they have their funds frozen by the U.S. Overseas. At the same time, you have this resistance stronghold, Panjshir Valley, that they have to deal with. So they still have to, diffuse that and put that fire out. Do you think they'll be able to do all of this and still be able to govern the country?
You see, first of all, this Panjshir business has been really blown out of proportion. It was a mistake of Taliban to resort to suggestion by others, by elders, to let's not increase this unity, and let's symbolically do not attack Panjshir and so forth. He took over all over Afghanistan in the blink of an eye. And then their mistake was they should have, once they took over Badakhshan and Takhar, they should have straight came into Panjshir and cleaned it up. But now the West, they need stooges. You see, the Henry Levy, the Zionist philosopher, he has, advocated or popped up this individual, Ahmed Massoud, in Paris, and introduced him to the president of France. Like his father, he is also serving foreign interests. There's nothing legendary about him, about his father. His father was a prophet of the Russians.
So wait, let me jump in here to make sure that we understand you correctly. You're saying that Israel is responsible for some kind of support that he is giving this person from what's called the National Resistance Front, Ahmad Massoud? Did I understand you correctly here?
This Zionist by Henry Levy, his name is, he's from France. he has been involved in most Muslim countries in the conflict and instigates so-called resistance in order to create disorder in Muslim societies. He has done the same thing back in the 90s. He came to Panjshir doing the same thing, and he's done the same thing this time.
Okay. All right.
The issue is this: the Taliban wanted to avoid bloodshed.
Okay.
If they
let
do
me
not want to avoid bloodshed,
I'm going to ask you to hold on to your thoughts. Let me bring Shah Mahmood Hanifi back into the conversation here. So let's look at the international either acceptance or rejection or a state of doubt at this point when it comes to the Taliban. For example, the European Union, it has not recognized the Taliban. The EU Commission President saying that it's not holding political talks with what it calls the militants, and this a week after they seize control of Afghanistan. How do you see the international recognition coming when it comes to the Taliban? Is the Taliban looking for it, or is the Taliban going to be happy with its immediate either acceptance or getting along with its neighbors? We can mention Russia, we can mention obviously China, and also Iran that has asked for a reconciliation to involve all groups within the country in order to establish peace and security.
Well, again, some of the public recognition by China and by Russia are one thing, but behind the scenes diplomatic maneuvering, Pakistan has not been mentioned. Pakistan's strategic depth has been apparently furthered with the Talibs returning to power. And I think the point about American withdrawal is a bit of an overstatement. I don't think the United States will be removing its presence in Afghanistan. It's covert presence, and it does involve intelligence agencies. And in this sense, the international community now has a number of constellations of groups, the European Union for one. But as our previous speaker so helpfully noted, within the European Union, certain countries, in this case France, exert, sort of leverage upon the whole in ways that make potentially France's bilateral perspective on the Taliban broader to include the European Union's, kind of policy position.
Well, let me bring in the guest then and see if he agrees with you on this, because you mentioned that the U.S. is not going to actually really withdraw, but covertly it's going to have a presence. Do you agree with that, Mr. Meraki? Is the U.S., even though it has said it's withdrawn itself, but it's going to have some kind of a presence, which then I ask you, does that mean that indirectly, directly, it's going to somehow have some kind of contact with the Taliban?
Well, the contact, Taliban will have contact with everyone in the world, all the governments. And the U.S., of course, been asking Pakistan, has been asking Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, as well as Kyrgyzstan and other countries for military base. They are worried, supposedly this boogeyman they call Al-Qaeda is going to evolve again out of nowhere with supposedly 150-something people in 2001, and then it's been obviously hatching, exponentially. It's not disappearing, and so their perspective is that they want to be vigilant in the region. And then the fact of the matter is the United States all along was concerned to be present in Afghanistan in order to monitor activity in China and Russia, and also to contain whatever they choose to contain, and also instigate domestic disorders in those societies. Whatever contentions that were there, they wanted to manipulate it for their own end.
Okay, I'm going to ask that question. I'm sorry, because we're fresh out of time. In 30 seconds, if you can, Shah Mahmood Hanifi, will the U.S. continue its cooperation one way or another with the Taliban, perhaps for its own means, such as countering China and maybe even with an eye on Iran?
I believe, again, in some form, yes, the United States will continue to engage who's ever in power in Kabul. And I think the support that the United States may extend to not just Ahmad Shah Massoud, but Saleh, who is there now as well, will remain a conduit of influence in the political equation of Afghanistan.
Unfortunately, I got to jump in. We're just fresh out of time on this. Thank you so much. Let me thank our guest, Professor of History at James Madison University, Shah Mahmoud Hanifi. Thank you. And academic, author, and expert on Afghanistan, Muhammad Dawood Maraki. And of course, Manami Nalami at the top of the debate. I'm sorry, at the top of the spotlight. From Mikoa Tagwe and the entire team, it's goodbye until next time.